Information. According to Webster, it's the communication or reception of knowledge or intelligence. Knowledge obtained from investigation, study, or instruction. Intelligence, news, facts, data. But how do we receive this knowledge or intelligence? And how do we communicate it to others? Do we write memos? Send emails? Make telephone calls? Do we Skype? Tweet? Text? Or just plain talk to each other face to face? Actually, we receive and communicate information in all these ways. But how will we communicate information in the future? Will Facebook and Google be replaced by something we don't even have a name for because it hasn't been invented yet?
Certainly information is critical to who we are, and it will become even more important in the future. It can be overwhelming. It can impact us in ways that we sometimes do not even expect.
This is what tonight's program is all about. The future of information. How we will communicate this information and the role it will play in our daily lives.
One of the top priorities that people have identified is navigating these waters between, on the one hand, a great desire for access to all sorts of information, but on the other hand, a desire to protect privacy.
The Future of Information is a three-step initiative that began over a year ago with the Future of Information Alliance, a University of Maryland campus-wide forum, a cross-section of UMD faculty, students, and staff from all academic disciplines.
We've also created an entity which we're calling our Board of Founding Partners, or our Founding Partners. And these are institutions outside the university that have a deep interest in the future of information. And they include the Library of Congress, the National Archives, the Newseum, the National Geographic Society, the Smithsonian, the National Park Service, the Barry School, the Online Academy, Sesame Workshop, and WAMU 88.5 Radio.
We need a true alliance, and that true alliance comes from partnerships with people that care deeply about bringing information to the general public.
Tonight, we'll focus on the first of this three-step initiative, the future of information, the Future-ists. Three leading futurists from three leading futuristic companies. Dr. Dan Russell is Director of User Happiness at Google. Dr. Mary Czerwinski manages the research on human-computer interaction at Microsoft. Dr. Abdur Chowdhury is a former chief scientist at Twitter.
The three visiting futurists that we asked to join us in our first year of this program are involved in innovating for the information landscape that we'll all be encountering as we go down the road. So in a sense, they're in some ways visiting from the future. They're a step ahead of us. They know the new tools and opportunities that are being created and some ideas about what can be done with those things.
From the Newseum in Washington, D.C., the University of Maryland is proud to present three individual futurists, three futuristic companies, the future of information. Please welcome tonight's moderator, WAMU-FM talk show host, Kojo Nnamdi.
Very happy to be here this evening. When the Future of Information Alliance set out to bring its first visiting futurists to campus and to this program, they looked for three people who not only were leaders in their field, but were also leaders in changing the future. Each of these innovators has changed the way we look for, use, and present information. And I'm particularly happy to welcome them to Washington to talk about the future because, as you know, in this town, the future is only as far away as the next election. We don't see much farther into the future than that. So I would like to introduce them for you now. Please welcome Dan Russell. Good to see you again. Mary Czerwinski. Abdur Chowdhury. So we will start with Dan Russell. Dan Russell, your turn.
So in thinking about the future of information, I realized this is a tough assignment. Partly because the future is awfully close. I know Washington thinks about elections, we think about technology shifts, we think about idea shifts. So I thought it would be interesting to start by thinking about a technology you probably know about. You are a hyper-literate audience. True? So you probably know about this technology. You probably know what those little white marks are on the spines of the book. You probably know how to search out and find books in this collection. You maybe even know how to search inside of those books, right? So you understand this technology pretty well. But what I want to talk about are search questions that you probably haven't thought about much. Now let me tell you a story. My son is 14 and he loves Stanford basketball. So we go to Stanford basketball and you know what happens. Crowds get excited, they chant, they sing, and this is the kind of thing that happens. Has this ever happened to you? Right. Now notice, my son says, Dad, I really like that. I want that on my iPod. You can't Shazam it because all these people are singing. And Shazam works with, as you know, copyrighted, recorded digital music, right? So what do? Dad, you work at Google. You can figure this out. And I think for about a second, I realized, wait, what are the lyrics? I'm stuck. And with all my knowledge about how Google works and how indexing works and retrieval, I say, son, give up. There's no hope. Being a good 14-year-old boy, he totally ignores Dad and goes to Google search engine and types, ooh, 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 ooh. The number one hit is what he wanted. Okay? He was brave in a way that I wasn't. I thought it was just a hopeless task because I knew too much. I was self-limiting, right? So what I find interesting is that the future of information is going to be many things. One thing it will be is social. What's that got to do with the Stanford song? The reason he was able to find that was that many people had asked that same question. And there are Q&A sites, question answering sites out there that answer that question many, many times. The knowledge of the internet grows by people contributing stuff to it. One of the kinds of things they're contributing are questions and answers. That's a kind of social contribution. There are other kinds of social contributions. For example, I was in Portland a couple of years ago and I was on this tram and sitting next to me was a homeless guy. No kidding. He had this in his lap. I thought, wait. Homeless guy, big camera, bigger lens, right? And I thought that was really interesting. And what he was doing, he explained to me, because I had to ask, right? I'm an anthropologist. I have to go where the data is. So he said, what I do is I go to the airport, which is where that tram was coming back from, and I take pictures of the tails of planes. He's a plane spotter. You see those numbers at the bottom of the tail? That's what he's photographing. He's photographing the tail numbers because he wants to go to a website like this and say, hey, I saw this plane land today. Sounds dumb, right? It's kind of like train spotting, the old technology. Except there's now an international community of people who swap tail numbers. Why is this important? These are the people who figured out the extraordinary rendition flights. Because they were the people who saw there were planes taking off with no numbers. And they would say, you know, there's a Gulfstream 4 that just left from London with no numbers. It's got a mark on the upper right aileron. If you see it land, let us know. And they pieced together socially through the net what was going on. Wikipedia is a social effort. It's a social consciousness raising, barnstorming kind of great creation of content, creation of media. There's even more deep kinds of conversations that happen. There's a well-known site called Math Overflow where people ask questions like this. Are there more connected or disconnected graphs on n vertices? And they answer with replies like this. Now, here's what's really interesting about this. These guys publish papers, deep mathematical papers, where the guy who asked the question is a co-author. They are creating new kinds of knowledge because they have this accessible group through the internet. One of the things that we have at Google is, as you probably know, Google Docs. The great thing about Google Docs is the ability for people to write together. Classrooms do this all the time. You can see the history revision on the right-hand side. That's what that panel is. You can see who edited it, when, and who did what. No longer can little Johnny get away with not adding anything to the document. You've never seen that, I know. Right? You can also see what a particular author has created, because that person, Lisa is in red, Dan's in blue, Bob's in green. We also have synthetic knowledge being created by social organizations like this. WikiLeaks, doesn't matter what your politics is. The Guardian put it together with Google Maps, Google Earth, and we're able to project onto an image of, in this case, Afghanistan, to see exactly what incidents happened exactly where, by mapping from the WikiLeaks entry to the location in that point in Afghanistan. You can now roll over every one of those things and figure out, was that friendly fire? Was that a civilian casualty? What's going on? The future of information is social. People construct these things, and it's also dense. That nice WikiLeaks example is a great illustration of that. Lots of content, and we're moving rapidly to a world like this. Every book, every edition, 24/7. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. But you can see that's the direction we're going. We've scanned over 15 million books. We have more than 24 hours of video being uploaded to YouTube every minute we're sitting here. Okay, we've already uploaded 5 days. Okay, you get the idea. There are billions of images in Google Images, 78,000 images of anteaters. The great thing is all this stuff is searchable, right? You can ask a question like, what's the population of Japan, and get that. Oh, by the way, as of 2008. You can ask, how tall is the Empire State Building? It will tell you in feet. If you ask it in cubits, it will tell you how many cubits tall it is. You can ask questions like, what is 20,000 leagues under the sea? Really? The truth is, you didn't actually know, did you? And you call yourself a hyperliterate audience. Okay? You can ask, what's the airspeed of an unladen swallow? And it will tell you, African or European, right? The revolution is being televised. You kind of knew this already, but it's 24 hours per minute being uploaded. This is a nice example of the way social contributions to knowledge are being disseminated through the mechanism of video. And so it's not just that there's a lot, it's not just that it's dense, but there's more compendia of information being uploaded all the time. You can think of it this way. There's a Library of Congress being added to the net, searchably, every day. And we're speeding up. We're speeding up. Information future is going to be fast. For example, when you do a Google query like this one, you Google query for Newseum, right? How long does it take to get the answer back? 1.8 million results in less than a quarter of a second. I haven't got all minute to wait. So one of the things that's fascinating about this is through the mechanism of internet search, we can find additional resources. For example, Wolfram Alpha allows you to, without thinking about it too hard, do a quadratic curve fitting to a data set from the comfort of your web browser, perhaps in your pajamas. One of the things about it is it's fast. We index content as it comes up on the web incredibly quickly. You see here, I did a query this afternoon for the New York Occupy protest, and you can see results that are coming in on a time scale of minutes. One of the things the future of information is, it will be literate. Or rather, it has to be literate if we're going to use it to our advantage. And what is information literacy? What I mean by that is simply that it's a set of skills that allow you to understand and use the technology, use the information that's out there, knowing what's available, knowing what's possible, knowing a set of tactics that allow you to implement those to get to the information you want, and a set of strategies that allow you to organize that information to answer a big problem. Finally, it's evaluation. How do you evaluate the content you're searching for? Here's an example of a skill. How many of you knew that you could actually search in other languages with Google? Right? Here's an example where I did Dolphin Temple, and I asked for results from Greek pages. You notice the result, the first result down there, is actually in English. I asked in English, searched in Greek, got the answer back in English. Or my favorite example is this. I have a J-pop singer, a Japanese pop singer named Tsuji Ayano that I like. And so I typed in her name in English, and it says, did you mean Tsuji Ayano? Wait a second. It gave me this page as a correct answer. It did my search in English, looked it up in Japanese, found that I misspelled it English to Japanese, translated it back to English and said, did you really mean this? That's really smart. But what's interesting is if you don't know that's possible, you'll never think to frame the question that way. Another example. You have to be a literate user of information to do things like this. I was doing a field study in Los Angeles. A woman was looking for information about the emission control equipment on cars. And so she lands on this wonderful California.gov motor vehicle page. Look at the scroll bar on the right. It's a very long page. It's a very long page. And she scrolls through it line at a time, painfully, and she takes about 5 minutes, and she still hasn't found it. And I ask her, what are you doing? I'm searching for the information. She didn't know there was a keyboard shortcut that would allow her to trivially, instantly find the answer to that question. That's what you're seeing here. A keyboard shortcut allows you to get to the point in the document essentially instantly. Part of literacy is also knowing how to read the search results page. So for example, if you do a query like this, and I've tested at this point about 700 people with this question, half of them get it right, half of them get it wrong. That means they're guessing. The question is, does Palo Alto recycle milk cartons? Yes or no? If you guess, you're going to get it right half the time, right? And so I sampled several hundred people, 50% got it right. What happened? Here's what happened. You see that thing, the ellipsis there? You, hyperliterate audience of the Newseum, what does an ellipsis mean? It means that I, the author, have not elided any important material. This is a search result. It means that an algorithm actually just chopped up the string into random pieces and stuck them side by side. So the thing that goes right there before the juice and milk cartons, if you read this sort of as is, you say, Palo Alto Recycling Center no longer accepts styrofoam, juice and milk cartons, right? The true answer is the preceding text there is now accepts. Right? You have to click through. That's part of being a literate user. You need to know how to, for example, use tabs in your browser. That's what those things are, so you can search in parallel and go deeper into the content. Does everybody know how to use tabs? Exactly my point. Okay? Now, you probably know how to use this technology. Okay? Do you know about these technologies? Let me show you an interesting example. I was talking to a student who wanted to find out about Notre Dame Cathedral. And so I said, here's what you do. You look for a 3D warehouse. In that 3D warehouse, you can find a solid model of Notre Dame. Kid said, what? A model of Notre Dame? I said, yeah. Click on that. That's what you're seeing here. Click on the Cathedral of Notre Dame de Paris. Download Notre Dame to your laptop. And then you can fly through it. My point, you need to know this kind of stuff is available. You need to be able to know what's happening in technology. With Google Goggles, for example, you can take a picture of the world. In this case, I'm taking a picture of Hoover Tower on Stanford campus. I hit the search button. It analyzes the picture and gives me the web page for Hoover Tower. I'm querying reality. You can talk to your computer. You can ask it, get me to the Newseum. It will tell you how to get there. You can ask impossible questions. This is a picture of where exactly? How would you find out? You can drag it into the query box at Google. It will tell you where that is. Turns out it's outside of Las Vegas. It's a place called Red Rock Canyon. So that was a task that was impossible before, and it's trivial now. That search took me about, 3 seconds, most of which was moving windows around. You can explore public data with capabilities like this and compare and contrast unemployment rates between counties in California, between counties everywhere in the United States. You need to understand this, that you can find data and do a little bit of massaging to it and answer questions like this. When it rains in Seattle, is it really different than when it rains at my house? Answer, yes. When it rains in Seattle, it rains. It really rains. That's the blue curve there. When it rains in Palo Alto, it rains a little bit, stops. Rains a little bit, stops. Very different. You can find pages like this. Anybody know what dihydrogen monoxide is? Yeah? Is it fatal, like this web page says? How many people think it's harmful to you or the environment? Dihydrogen monoxide is water. Okay? The problem with this is evaluating this content. The only way to find out is to look at this note at the bottom that says content veracity not implied. So what does it mean to be literate for us? Information literacy means understanding what's possible. What can you do? How to use the tools that we give you, and how to evaluate the quality of the information you get back. What does this mean for us? What it means, I think, for us in this room is we need to learn ourselves. We need to understand what information literacy is and how to teach it to our students and how to teach it to ourselves. So my question for you tonight is going to be, keeping in mind that information is moving fast, it's dense, it's social, how are you going to use that information in the future? What's your plan for yourself and for your children? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Czerwinski.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. What I'm going to talk about is what I think is the future of human-computer interactions. So I'll be talking less about what can be done today and a lot more about what might be possible in the next 5 to 10 years. You know, after years and years of doing research on large displays and gestures and speech, in 2007, we had an envisioning team that took all of our research, put it together for Craig Mundy, and he went on the road and he showed people examples of what could be possible. Now that you have a Surface computer and you have projectors that can throw things to the walls, and you can use your hands. By 2009, we had Natal, which became Connect, which we shipped last year. And now you can use your body as the controller. So combine that with speech, and you have a really new way of navigating information spaces and computers. And you can get so much more information up there to be useful. And, you know, shipping Connect was a huge thing. I think when we were doing the research that led to Connect, and it went across several research labs, actually, that fed into that, in addition to buying a small startup, I think, you know, people were really skeptical that we were going to be able to pull it off. Trust me, it was a stressful ship cycle. And we did. And there are many lessons we learned. Actually, one of the lessons that was really important was that game designers had to learn how to design games for this, because they had to put enough slop in the system that you could feel like you were actually doing something like bowling a ball. But actually, the system, it had a lot of error, but it made you feel like you were naturally doing it. And so once game designers learned how to design games for this new input technique, games got a lot more interesting and fun to play on Connect. So that was all success when we did it. We shipped it in time. And so you might think, okay, well, that's for games. That's not very useful. Well, just yesterday, Rob DeLine, Andy Bagel, and some others in my group, Ken Hinckley and Mary Morris included, just presented a system, a live system, that we actually designed for programmers but could be used for any, you know, team of information workers. And it takes a Connect that shines on the presenter and a Connect that shines on the whiteboard, and multiple devices, phones, touch input, and pen input, and gives you a whole new way now of interacting in a meeting. You can make notes. Everyone can get the same information back and forth on all their devices. The computer recognizes your gestures. Everything gets saved. Everything is stored, and everything automatically gets sent to the cloud so anybody can have it. And it's actually a very exciting system, and I think it's something that's going to come to fruition very soon. So why am I saying this? We need to remember that it's not just about a phone or a computer screen, but actually now there's a whole ecology of devices that can share your information and share your information spaces. And even if it is just a phone, it may be that you have a projector on that phone and you can project the information from the phone onto a wall so you can see it better and you can interact with it more easily. There are all kinds of things that come from using your body. We have a whole area of the brain that's dedicated to motor memory, basically, is the way to describe it. And you automatically remember where you put things when you move your body. And so this opens up a whole new possibility of actually helping users remember where they put information even, so you don't lose it. The other thing that's really changing, I talked about lots of devices in your ecosystem. The devices are really moving fast. So in 2006, Ben Peterson and I were on a panel at Carnegie Mellon, and it was celebrating the 20-year anniversary of their human-computer interaction lab in Dury. And we were supposed to talk about the future of computing, and we said, oh, there are going to be sensors on everyone, sensing your heart rate, your brain waves, your blood pressure. You know, you're going to track everything. Well, guess what, folks? This is actually happening. It's happening faster maybe than I predicted it. It's only 2011. That was 5 years ago I talked about that. Now you can get your EEG recordings. You can do galvanic skin response. I have this Effectiva device, which they're showing on the hand. It's very, very accurate, so you can actually see when you're aroused and when you're kind of uninterested. I would love it if I could see that you were all wearing these devices and give me some feedback. It's actually very accurate for me. Even during a tennis lesson, I see when I'm kind of like bored, and then all of a sudden we start playing a game and I get real excited. So they work very, very well. We also know a ton now about and can track with computer vision how your muscles move. We can also put sensors on your muscles in your face. Tells you a ton about emotion, frustration, and stress. I'm wearing my little Fitbit. I wear it everywhere I go. It tracks the number of steps I take and calculates the calories and activity levels of myself. And now you can buy t-shirts that actually do your heart rate. Some of them are actually going to start doing your skin temperature and your breathing rate very soon. And some hospitals have already started putting these on patients so that they can automatically record their bodily functions. So in addition to all of this that is here today, and can be used tomorrow by computer systems that track you and log you, there are new ways of input. So there are armbands you can wear that track how your muscles are moving, which fingers you're pressing for new ways of inputting to a computer system wirelessly. You can project onto different parts of your body. I'm showing a projection onto a hand here, so you can dial a telephone number, but you actually can project menus, so you could just pick from your hand. We had one project in my group where doctors could project your broken bones onto the right part of your body, so you could actually understand what was going on with the injury instead of looking at a 3D model that made no sense to you. We have a tongue-based interface there, where Greg in our group, who's in a wheelchair, actually was able to move himself with his tongue in his wheelchair. The tongue's a very strong muscle. We don't use it very much. It's just kind of like a retainer. It's not that uncomfortable to wear. And eventually we'll have displays that will wear like contact lenses that will project information into our eyes. Hopefully comfortably. It doesn't look very comfortable to me yet, but it's a work in progress for the future. So we have all these new devices to add to our digital ecosystem. And just think of the things that are possible once we start adding all those streams together and giving you this information. And maybe giving this information to a very small network of people you trust or care about, or people who care about you and are worried about you, or maybe your healthcare professionals. Another thing that I think is a huge breakthrough, we now have digital fabrics. This particular dress was designed by an artist in my group, and she's using projection underneath the dress to show a Twitter feed. The keyboard does work, so you can tweet, and it will show your tweets to the public. It's an art statement. It's a statement about privacy. She was trying to make a point. She won several awards for this beautiful dress. But now she is working with real fabrics, weaving electronics into fabrics. And think about the things we could do with those different materials now if we know things about you. Well, maybe if you're stressed out, we could do a soothing motion to calm you down. Or maybe if someone's in your office and really starting to get mad at you, we take feathers and we start to raise them so you leave. There are lots of ways we could go with this. She's got a fashion side to her, so I'm sure it's going to be gorgeous, whatever it is. But think about the future when your clothes say things to other people about you and how you're feeling. Last things I'm going to finish with are things about visualization, because once you have all this data, you have to show it to users in a way they can understand. And these information streams are starting to be everywhere, and we need to give citizen scientists and even everyday people interesting ways to make sense of that data. But the problem is there's so much data, and it's not interactive. You know, you're just getting thrown data at you, and you maybe can't make sense of it. You really need to interact with it. So we actually believe in my group that using this economy of devices and the Connect and sketching and pen input and speech that we can do a lot better for people and allow you to interact with your data if we give you the right tools and make it very easy. So we're trying to work on new information visualization ideas that allow you to interact with your data in ways that make sense to you and are very, very natural. My last question to you: how do we improve information consumption and sharing for the good of individuals and social groups? Because once we have your information, your personal streams of information, we can certainly do some aggregation, right? There are issues of anonymity, privacy, security, but it may be that you're willing to share some information, maybe some abstracted information, with your loved ones, with your doctor, maybe with your work group. So how do we improve that? And especially, how do we leverage the natural user interaction ideas that have started to emerge and are really popular? Touch input, speech. How do we do that in a way that's really useful to individuals to make sense of their own data in their own lives? Thank you very much.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Abdur Chowdhury.
Futurist. As I told people earlier today and yesterday, it's the coolest title ever. And then visiting futurist a little better because I'm visiting from the future. So, emergence. In this picture here, we see what ants are able to do when they work together. They're able to build huge houses for themselves. And the question I have in my own mind is, as we bring humanity together in more and more ways, how are we able to challenge and build bigger things and solve big problems together? In the past, we've always thought about computing as a bunch of computer screens and people crunching numbers and plotting out graphs. And this one, people are predicting stock trends. And we've been very good at this over the last 30 or 40 years. We've built all kinds of computers. In fact, one of the ways we can measure our progress there is we do it in two different ways, like how many of these things do we have and how fast are they? One of the ways we measure it is what we call MIPS, or millions of instructions per second. The fastest computer right now is about 150,000 million instructions per second. And on our planet, we have about 1.5 billion computers. That's pretty cool. It's done all kinds of amazing things that Dan and others have talked about. But the way we actually made those more powerful was we brought them together. Like, one machine was only so powerful. So we build huge clusters of them, rooms full of them, buildings full of them. And so the rest of computer science has been working on connecting all these through huge networks. And the way we measure that is how fast can we transfer data. But you think about this, there's something called Moore's Law and how fast we've been growing these computers and how fast they've been getting faster and more memory, et cetera. And there's really not a step function. It's kind of a linear progression. It's just kind of getting more and more, or doubling every 2 years. And so in my mind, I'm like, how are we actually going to get a step function? Where would we find more and more like compute power to solve big problems? And the only thing I can think of that's really going to change this is bringing people into the picture. And so let's think of people in terms of just those paradigms for just a second. It turns out that a human being probably has the compute power of 100 million MIPS, right? You think about all the neurons that are firing off in your brain at every second, processing all the images coming in. And we don't have just a billion of them, we have 7 billion of us on this planet right now. The other amazing thing that we haven't had in the past, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, was an ability to communicate with each other. And so, like, how is this changing? It turns out most of us have phones now. In fact, there's over 5 billion people with cell phones now. How many people have cell phones today in the audience? All right, who doesn't? There's one dude over there. And my natural response is, you forgot it at home. And so what I really like to think about is, how are we going to emerge to solve big problems when we bring all these people together? So it turns out people have been thinking about bringing humans into the mix to solve really hard things. Carnegie Mellon has a really great game that they put on the internet called the ESP game. And what it allows people to do is two people will see an image that are playing against each other, and they have to tag it. So little girl, cat. And then when they get the words right, then it tags that image. And it turns out computer vision and object recognition is really hard. We don't have great software for it. But what we've done is bring human beings into the mix to solve these hard problems now. Fold It. Has anyone heard of Fold It from University of Washington? One guy. It's an amazing project. What they're doing is they put up amino acids and give them to people, and they have to like fold these amino acids in certain ways, and they're trying to find cures for AIDS. Awesome. What we're doing is tapping into that amount of intellect via computers. But not just those things, like, has anyone ever heard of MTurk or Mechanical Turk from Amazon? It's a great way to crowdsource problems. In fact, if you can like bring it down to a simple task, you could say like, translate this from Spanish to Japanese, or tag this image, or does this make sense, yes or no? And if you can get it down to small tasks, you farm it out to thousands of people, and they get paid like a penny or two to solve these small micro tasks. Right? Human beings and human brains becoming part of this big mesh and increasing our knowledge and solving tasks. Well, I think there's been a few problems. Like, if you sit back and look at every one of these like solutions, they're great. We're tapping into that huge brain power that we all have to solve problems. But in reality, there's always been a small number of humans that are involved. And I think that's true for a few different reasons. One is the form factor. Every one of us had our cell phones on us right now, except for one guy. But we don't have our laptops or PCs. In fact, if you sit back and think, hey, I'm going to go buy PCs for 5 billion people or 7 billion people, that's quite an economic task. But yet, the world is actually able to absorb the cost of small cell phones that cost $10, even in like Africa or other places in which the amount of money coming in is very small. And so I really want to start thinking about ways in which we use this cell phone to bring human beings together. I really think that like the human being has become like a new attribute. Like we think about these human beings being connected, and they have all kinds of new capabilities. I can take pictures, summarize this event. In fact, I could take a picture of you right now and share it with other people. I can text. All the now cell phones have GPS or accelerometers, so we can see where you are, which directions you're moving. And so human beings have become this huge sensor now, a sensor network around our planet. In fact, the cyborg that we thought was going to come has come, but unfortunately it doesn't look like the guy on the left. It looks like our mom on the right. Right, all those capabilities that the cyborg would have: instant information access, ability to share pictures, communicate with others anywhere. We have now. And so I think that there's going to be a few phases of this social computing. And the first phase is human beings becoming sensors, sharing texts, pictures, videos, etc. Phase 2 is us becoming more and more aware of the world, because more and more of us are sharing it, because we've become connected and shared. And the last phase, in which I see the future, is how are we going to emerge together and work together to build big anthills or solve hard problems. At Twitter, we built a lot of technology that would analyze the world's conversations as people were talking about things. And about 3 years ago, I was coming back to DC for Thanksgiving, and I got on the system, and the system actually watches what everyone's talking about on the world. And it pulls out the people, places, and things and says, what's odd here? I should push that up so other people become aware of it. Or what's interesting here? And instead of seeing things about Thanksgiving or turkey or football or being bloated, I saw Mumbai and bombings. And so what we've now found is this is the only way to access some of this real-time information. It's because the human beings have become the sensors of what's going on around the world itself. In fact, all the data coming in about that event was from the people that were there. There's been a lot of cases of this, so you'd say, oh, that was one example. It turns out there was a guy taking a ferry ride across the Hudson, and lo and behold, a plane landed in the river next to him. There was no reporters next to him, and he takes a picture and shares it with the world. And within minutes, it's shared everywhere, and everyone can see what's going on. Photosynth from Microsoft, amazing product. What they do is everyone sharing pictures of an event are able to take all those pictures and build a 3D model of what's going on, and you can like fly through and see all the people and move around this virtual world because we've all been a sensor. We all took a picture, a snapshot, filtering, summarizing the perfect picture that we see in our mind, putting it together. Google uses it actually for traffic, real-time traffic. So each one of us, when we pull out our phone and we're like, hey, what's going on with this traffic? What's happening is the GPS and accelerometer sending back data about how fast you're traveling. And they're like, hey, like the Beltway should not be going at 5 miles an hour. Yeah. Even though it usually is. And so what we're doing, it's this marrying and merging of technology and people together to create new things and make us more aware. Earlier this year, there was one of the largest earthquakes outside of Japan, a little over 9.0. And what ensued was one of the largest tsunamis that has ever been recorded. Devastating event. And what I'd like to do is take a few seconds, and we're going to go through a visualization. And what we're going to watch is the spread of information about that event occurring. And so you can see Japan as a little island over there. And what we're going to watch in one color is messages coming out, pink. And then what we're going to watch in green is anyone who takes that message from someone in Japan and shares it with their friends. And what you're going to see is the green streaks go to where their friends live. And we're going to watch the 1 hour after the event occurred. And what's amazing about this is we all know about information and data spreading and how news travels, but we really don't know how news travels. And what we're going to do is take a few seconds and watch how the news traveled of this event over the next hour. Still going. Just on Twitter. In fact, what we're going to do is pull away the map and look. You can almost see an outline of like North America and Europe. In fact, I like to call this like the power grid of the world. Like Siberia, nothing's really going on up there. But now with like this new technology, we can actually see how human beings are becoming more aware. And not only becoming aware, but we filter like what's important. It's no longer like, hey, I saw a cool Dilbert cartoon. It's like, this is really big news. You guys should know about this. Now, other things start to occur. In 2008, I believe it was, there was an earthquake in LA. A few seconds later, the first tweet came out. 4 minutes later, the local TV station got on and said there's been an earthquake. 9 minutes later, the AP got on and said they wrote 150 words about the event occurring. In that same 9 minutes, we had collected enough data to write a book about what happened. The more important realization that I saw when I looked at this data was it wasn't about the event. Of course the event occurred. That's not the news. The news and more interesting thing was how people were emerging to react to it. They're reaching out to their friends and family and going, are you okay? Can you go pick up the kids from school? What's going on? Do you have power? And it was the secondary people reacting to these events and converging to try to figure out how to come up with solutions. What we're now going to do is take a few seconds, and we're going to watch a couple minutes before the Japanese tsunami, and then the communication to people inside the country after the event occurred. This is just the next hour afterwards. Yellow is messages coming out, pink in. The earthquake occurs, and there's about 15x more messages. And so it wasn't about the event. I mean, you don't reach out and say, hey, did you know that there was a tsunami? You reach out and say, are you okay? And so what was the first sent? The first thing is we all become sensors and connected. The next thing is we become aware of the world and the other people that we're living in and their needs. And the third thing is how are we actually going to emerge as a society and as humanity itself to solve large problems. And so my question and challenge really isn't to just this audience, but to the world, is how once we are all connected and more aware of each other, are we going to solve real problems? Not small little toy things of like we're going to build an anthill, but really solve AIDS and poverty and hunger and injustices. So with that, thank you very much.
Those indeed are the big challenges, and how we endeavor to solve those challenges is something that I'm sure is on the minds of everyone here, but I know you probably have more specific questions for members of our panel, so if you do, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you, and you can ask the question that you might have or offer the comment that you might have.
Well, the thing I was thinking about earlier was about the sensors mainly. One of the things I was thinking about was if people start wearing these and they start getting more connected, you know, mood sensors or where you're going or how much you're going, it'd be interesting to see the aggregate data from that as far as, you know, either throughout the day or in regions and over time, especially if you combine that with things like the Twitter data, like events and people's reactions, like how do you know, what happens if you start pairing up the mood and the event, and do you see any, you know, do you see how much that actually affects the people, not just a word here and there on Twitter, but actually, you know, not just the information, but actually the quality associated with that information?
So we did that experiment last summer and tested it longitudinally on people. It turns out that we tend to forget what our mood states were like in about 2 days. And we're very, very bad at remembering how our last week was, how our last month was, how our last year was. And we're very bad about remembering which events triggered these emotional states. So we developed a visualization that tracked all your activities, your speech, prosody, you know, were you very, very stressed out or were you kind of calm, who you were meeting with, what your calendar said, there's some connect information, where you were, and your galvanic skin response, just a few things, and put it together in a visualization that helped people reflect. And it turns out that all of our subjects found really, really interesting patterns in how they spent their time and activities. And when they got into kind of bad moods, they said, you know, I really should stop doing those kinds of things, or I should stop meeting with that person because I do come away in a really bad mood. But they also remembered really pleasant things and were surprised by really pleasant things. It actually turns out that very, very significant events weren't that useful because they actually remembered those pretty well. It was kind of the things that weren't interesting that kind of put them in a bad mood that were really interesting. So we are going to continue this work. Thank you. I think it's a really interesting line of research.
Well, I'm wondering to what extent things like that can drive public policy. Say, for instance, there's a city like Washington in which
everyone's upset about driving on the Beltway.
And everybody's stressed out.
In fact, they're so upset they move across the country and sell their car.
Exactly. I was thinking more specifically about the controversy over building a new stadium, where on the one hand it can be argued that in the final analysis this stadium won't make a lot of money for the city. On the other hand, some people feel it makes them feel good. Can this be a policy driver for the politician who's looking at an issue like this?
Well, I was going to say that there's an interesting bit of work done by Jonathan Harris and Sepp Kamvar. And do you guys remember the name of the book that they put out? I can't remember it. Someone can Google it, I'm sure. But what they did was something very similar to what you were describing. Instead of, for example, looking at the Twitter stream or looking at the GSR, you know, biodata, they were actually mining blog posts worldwide. And they were making interesting, similar correlations between, for example, the weather and how many people blogged, I feel sad. Yep. Or how, you know, the time of year and whether or not they had the February blues or not. And you could imagine doing that same kind of analysis for the blogs of, say, the metro Washington area and mining the sentiment about references to the stadium. And if you got enough of those, you could have an interesting signal. And if you could do that, you could be interesting.
I agree. I think corporations who spend billions of dollars on trying to make sure that their employees are happy and healthy and will stay, I think they could really mine this sentiment. You could use Twitter, you could use blogs, you could use email. That's a privacy issue, obviously. But I think you could use this to drive all kinds of change. Even where you put public parks, where you put your police force.
But is it TMI if I'm a hypochondriac? I mean, there's just so many more things I can find out now that's wrong with me. Yeah.
One of the questions that I'm really interested in is it's video. It's very hard to search video, and what is the future of that? I mean, there's a lot of information in videos that we don't have access to because unless we get it in a link, hey, take a look at this, you can't find it. And you can use transcripts of news organizations and that kind of thing, but what's the future for search for video?
Well, one thing that we've been doing with the YouTube group is to automatically do speech reco for the transcription. And of course, what you really want is the beautiful voices of newsreaders, right? Those transcribe pretty well. We're increasingly becoming more competent at transcribing videos of kids in backyards yelling. And those provide pretty good search index points. We can also extract text from videos, so that becomes another searchable point. Find all videos with a stop sign. Find all videos where the crawl is saying X, right? And so we can do stuff like that. And increasingly, there's a whole body of work on video indexing of various sorts, looking for cut points and shot choices and all that. So it's getting a lot better. Look forward to it.
And the main thing then is how do you visualize those sets of video search results, and how do you show where those results show up in threads of videos going back and forth to each other. We found that people really find that useful. It's a very, very easy, natural way to communicate back and forth, whether you're children and family or co-workers. So the visualization actually is a key part. You can't just do the search. You've actually got to have meaningful visualizations of those results to make sense.
You know, that reminds me of another thing, which is it's also interesting to look at the social data from say, the top 1,000 people who viewed this particular piece of video. Often it looks like this. The graph goes way up at the beginning because everybody watches the credits, the intro, and then it goes way down, and then you get a bump at the end. This is particularly true for lectures. They get the beginning ideas, and then they kind of zoom forward, and then they get what's on the test. So that sort of socially aggregated data is also a really interesting way to get into the video indexing problem.
My question is to Abdur. When you talk about going from sensors to emergence and what we can do to, these whole question of help big problems. Third world or emerging economies are leapfrogging from print to mobile. They're leapfrogging through the laptop phase, through the internet phase.
Because of the price point.
The price point as well as accessibility. Yeah. So you have this whole question of the mobile technology really empowering people today in terms of the economics, whether it's a farmer in a rural area, whether it's people who want information. Because of the price point, they are leapfrogging. So what kind of challenges do technology companies have in addressing these issues?
I think probably the first and most important problem there is the education of individuals, that they have access to this kind of knowledge and abilities. If you don't know that you have those abilities, you're not going to use it. In rural India, I could see people getting together, the farmers, and actually realizing that, hey, Bob is getting, 3 times the amount per X that I'm getting. Let's equalize and our prices. I could see people actually figuring out that a politician is corrupt or taking bribery by sharing that information and becoming more transparent with the world around them so things improve. I see a lot of that is just coming down to the education of the people. And that's something every one of us has to do.
I think we'll get our final question from the future.
Hi, my name is Dana, and I'd like to know or to learn about how come there are so many electronic things? I mean, the other day I was walking from my bus to my school, and I saw an electronic flower in the window. And I'd like to know, how come there are so many electronic things? Like, flowers smell good by themselves. I mean, if a computer's doing it, you can't really smell it. I mean, so sometimes the original thing is better than the computer things.
We've seen the future and we worried about it.
Even she figured it out. She's like, yeah, this is bad.
Exactly.
Oh.
So I think a serious answer to your question is electronics generally, and computer chips and so on, and computation, has this wonderful property of being really plastic. It's very easy to mold it into what you want. And so one of the great advances, for example, in robotics is that you can program a robot to take this shape, or that shape, or this shape, or this particular assembly, and you can change it very, very quickly. That's tough if you're going to build it into the infrastructure of the system, not using computation or not using electronics. So I think the easy answer is it's Play-Doh. You can shape it to whatever you want it to be. That's really an interesting property.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Russell. Mary Czerwinski. Abdur Chowdhury.